Hey, Vikings fan, there's something about this Vikings season that just feels different already. And once you hear what's happening behind the scenes, plus that huge primetime matchup everybody's talking about, you'll understand why fans are starting to believe this team could be way more dangerous than people expect. Come with me and I'll tell you everything, but first click the like button and write in the comments, "Go Vikings." There is one detail about the Minnesota Vikings' newly revealed international matchup that could end up defining a huge stretch of the season. And most fans are overlooking it completely. Everyone immediately focused on the location, the primetime spotlight, and the revenge narrative against the San Francisco 49ers. But when you really break this down, this game in Mexico City could become one of the biggest swing moments of the Vikings' entire 2026 campaign. The Vikings are officially heading back to the international stage, and this time it will happen under the lights on Sunday Night Football in Week 11 against the San Francisco 49ers in Mexico City. And what makes this matchup even more fascinating is how perfectly the storylines are already building months before kickoff. Minnesota now has two former 49ers on the roster, Jawan Jennings and Jordan Mason. And suddenly, this game already feels like one of those emotional NFL moments fans circle on the calendar immediately. You can already imagine the atmosphere. Prime time, altitude in Mexico City, Vikings fans traveling internationally again, the NFL pushing Minnesota into another global spotlight game because, whether people admit it or not, this franchise consistently draws attention overseas. Patrick Seatman even pointed out that this is becoming a recurring pattern for the organization, mentioning how often the Vikings have been selected for international games since 2022. The league clearly sees value in this team beyond the United States, and that says a lot about the Vikings brand right now. But here's where things get really interesting for Minnesota fans. This isn't one of those early morning London games where people are half awake trying to survive coffee before kickoff. This is Sunday Night Football. National audience, energy packed into the building. And if the Vikings are legitimately competing for a playoff spot by Week 11, this could become one of the defining NFC matchups of the year. Because there's a very realistic scenario where both teams are battling directly for wildcard positioning late in the season. That changes everything. Suddenly, this isn't just a cool international event. It becomes a pressure game with postseason implications attached to every drive. And honestly, the Jordan Mason angle alone is going to fire up Vikings fans. Imagine Mason running against his former team under the lights and delivering one of the biggest performances of his career. Patrick Seatman painted the picture perfectly. 15 carries, close to 100 rushing yards, touchdowns, physical football, setting the tone against the franchise that let him go. Then add Jawan Jennings potentially making key catches against San Francisco in a revenge game environment. Those are the types of narratives that completely take over NFL media during the week leading into the game. And there's another underrated advantage here that Vikings fans should not ignore. Technically, this is not a true road game. Yes, there will probably be a heavy 49ers presence because of geography and travel convenience, but Vikings fans travel extremely well, and there's a real chance Minnesota supporters make enough noise to shift the atmosphere. If Vikings fans flood Mexico City the way they've shown up internationally before, this could feel far more neutral than a standard game in Santa Clara. That matters late in the year, especially when every NFC playoff contender is fighting for positioning. Another major takeaway from the discussion is how favorable Minnesota's overall travel situation appears to be this season. The Vikings rank near the bottom of the league in total travel miles, sitting 27th overall. That may not sound exciting on the surface, but experienced NFL fans know reduced travel matters over a 17-game season. Less fatigue, more recovery time, fewer cross-country trips. Those details can absolutely influence late-season performance. And when you compare Minnesota's situation to teams like the Rams and 49ers, who are traveling massive distances because of international commitments and coast-to-coast scheduling, the Vikings quietly gain a physical advantage over the course of the year. Then you start looking deeper into the schedule itself, and there's a reason optimism is growing around this roster. At home, the Vikings will host division rivals including the Chicago Bears, Detroit Lions, and Green Bay Packers. But there are also several matchups Patrick Seatman described as very gettable games. Games against the Carolina Panthers, Atlanta Falcons, Miami Dolphins, Indianapolis Colts, and Washington Commanders were all highlighted as matchups Minnesota should realistically expect to win if this team is serious about contending. But maybe the most fascinating part of this entire conversation is what's happening behind the scenes in the front office. While fans are understandably focused on the Mexico City game, the Vikings are simultaneously conducting one of the most important GM searches this franchise has had in years. And according to Alec Lewis, there's growing belief that Rob Brzezinski may currently be the favorite for the permanent position. That alone changes the direction of the organization. Because the report suggests Minnesota may be moving toward a hybrid structure, Rob Brzezinski, handling the GM title while pairing him with a more traditional scouting-heavy executive focused on personnel evaluation. That would represent a major philosophical shift for the Vikings front office. And if that happens, it tells you the organization may want to return to a more old-school football structure centered heavily around scouting backgrounds and long-term roster evaluation. Now add another layer to this. Kevin O'Connell is reportedly heavily involved in the interview process. That is massive. Because whether fans fully realize it or not, O'Connell appears to have enormous influence inside the organization right now. The next GM may not simply be chosen based on resume strength alone. Chemistry with O'Connell could become one of the deciding factors, and that immediately makes several candidates extremely interesting, especially Ray Agnew from the Lions front office. Agnew's resume becomes hard to ignore once you examine Detroit's recent draft success. The Lions have built one of the NFL's strongest young cores through elite drafting, including impact additions like Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Brian Branch, and Sam Laporta. If Minnesota can import some of that evaluation success into their own building, the long-term future becomes extremely intriguing. And here's the part Vikings fans are going to debate non-stop over the coming weeks. Does Kevin O'Connell now have too much power, or exactly the amount a modern franchise coach should have? Because all signs point toward him being deeply involved in shaping the future of this organization. That's where things stand right now for Minnesota. A franchise preparing for another international spotlight game while simultaneously reshaping the front office structure behind the scenes. And honestly, those two storylines may end up connected more than fans realize. Because if the Vikings win games like the one against San Francisco and Mexico City, the belief in this current direction is only going to grow louder. What do you think, Vikings fans? Is the Mexico City showdown against the 49ers already the most important game on the schedule? And which GM candidate would you trust most to build the future around Kevin O'Connell? Drop your thoughts below, and if you're ready for more Vikings news and exclusive updates all season long, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more news. Go Vikings!